Our next speaker is someone that I've known actually for a number of years. We obviously share the affliction of famous name syndrome. Obviously, I'm an aggressive midfielder. He's a bit cooler, 80s synth pop icon. But obviously, it has served us well. I'm doing this. And he's some kind of big shot at EE now. So Howard is actually from this area. So his first PR job, I'm right, I think that's right. The first PR job was in this very city. So obviously, this region is just simply the best at helping people do stuff. They're doing some really interesting stuff at EE with places like Wembley. And obviously, you must know Kevin Bacon, as apparently we all do. So, enough of me. Howard Jones.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for inviting me here. Really appreciate it. Thank you for this morning's speakers. It's been really interesting, actually, to see the convenient overlaps with what I'm hoping to say today. And I would say they're not something that's going to eat into what I was going to say. They are clear demonstrations of themes that are coming up. I think one of the key themes that's coming up is about personal. So, quick question, and I think Paul covered it actually in the intro to his little bit, based on the stats responses. Does personal matter to you in the marketing that you create? Question one. Yeah. Does personal matter to you in the marketing that you receive? So we all agree personal, and I don't necessarily think we would all agree on what personal is, how to define it, but we'd all agree that personal matters. But why does personal matter? I'm not going to take answers on that because I think we could then be here all day. I think there are two things that have driven an absolutely desperate desire on the part of consumers to receive things that they feel are personal, and for marketeers responding to that to feel the absolute need to deliver things that their consumers feel are personal. And I think the first one of those is noise. Emma mentioned it earlier. The signal-to-noise ratio. The signal-to-noise ratio is actually a term that comes from the telecom industry, which is convenient. It literally means the signal that you're trying to put through is drowned out by other competing signals. So the signal-to-noise ratio, or OSNR as we call it, is absolutely prevalent in today's society. We are drowned by stuff. Digital content surrounds us and it drowns us. And actually, it makes it incredibly difficult to find the thing that you want. And therefore, you don't feel that any of it is for you. And therefore, you want and crave and latch onto the thing that is for you, the thing that feels remotely personal. Grab it. Grab it, and you will then be an advocate of it. So if you can create personal content, then you're on to a winner. So that's noise. That's the first one. The second one is very much linked to that, and it's the word that keeps coming up alongside personal: authenticity. Do people think that it is possible to be authentic as a brand when inherently you're selling something? Is it possible to be authentic? Yeah. What makes... is it easier to be authentic if you're a small business or a large business? Either. So that's really interesting. So I don't know if Chris is still in the room, but from Chris's presentation this morning, no criticism whatsoever, but one of the things I exclusively felt that he was talking about was small to medium businesses. So a lot of those mechanisms, with the very, very, very strong exception of become the Wikipedia of your industry, which I wrote down in my notes, and I'll take that back as something that my team should all think about trying to achieve, because I thought that was quite very powerful. A lot of what he was talking about was about being small, in relative terms. So if we want personal and we want authentic, the ways in which you achieve that are to become obsessed with your customer, to know your customer. Boo-hoo us, but we have 30 million customers. How do I get to know each and every one of those customers? Is that possible? So you then need to find a way to be personal and authentic, cut through the noise, and scale at the same time. And that's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge. And actually, I'm not going to propose to answer that question today. And I'm also not, as the intro suggested, going to tell you how all of technology is going to influence your marketing. I think we couldn't quite achieve that in 30 minutes. And I'd be out of my depth in about 3 minutes. There's one bit of technology that I know most about, and that's mobile. And the fascinating thing about today already is that it just keeps coming up. And even when it's not coming up explicitly, actually what we're talking about is consumption on mobile devices. Who doesn't have a mobile device in front of them right now? I think there was one person that Chris called out. Yeah. So is this lady the only person that doesn't have a mobile device in front of them right now? So you don't either. So there's two. I think that's pretty remarkable, but it's probably also pretty representative. So we are hooked on these things. About 98% of our demographic, if we assume the bulk of us are under 50, all have smartphones. And the smartphone is the primary go-to option for discovery of news now, above and beyond anything else like websites. So mobile is growing. Is it painfully obvious for me to say that mobile is growing? Yeah? If it wasn't, this presentation, it would be incredibly easy to be really interesting, because I could tell you that mobile is growing. We use mobile data as a really good proxy for growth, but you can pretty much measure the success of mobile by any metric. Pick a metric, any metric, doesn't really matter. You can measure its success, and it is dominant in Western culture. It is dominant in any and all developed markets. From the ages of approximately 12 upwards, it is absolutely the dominant form it's the dominant platform for consumption and sharing of content. Mobile is massively flexible as a platform for marketers to use, and it's also potentially very personal. It's your own. It tracks you in terms of your location. It's the thing that you put your own content on. You make it personal. You personalize it. And it has the potential to be an amazingly powerful personal vehicle, more so than anything else that we own. I want to talk a little bit about the future, as per Paul's brief, and look at what's coming. And I want to put that in the context of a quote, and because the powerful quotes seem to be the theme of the day as well. And this is a bit of a crib from Bill Gates. He said, in general, we overestimate what we can achieve in a year, but we radically underestimate what we can achieve in 10. Look back 10 years, how different was the world in which you communicated to your customers? It was completely different, is the answer. Completely different technology in their hands, completely different content as a result of that technology. Never underestimate the link between the technology and the content. One drives the other. If you don't have the technology, you cannot have the content. The Sega Dreamcast. Does anyone remember the Sega Dreamcast? A very enthusiastic yes from this man here. It was the world's first networked games console. It came out before broadband networks hit the UK. It was completely useless as a product. Brilliant product now. In hindsight, a couple of years later, it would have been great. Completely useless. One of the things that's driving the growth, one of the things that gives us real good, strong insight into behavior is live experiences and live events. This is the tip of the iceberg on usage, but it's like I say, it's all indicative stuff. So what we see is massive amounts of usage, predominantly downloading, because that's where the bulk of the content. If you use Facebook just naturally, there's more data coming down than going up. But what we see from live events is a swing towards more sharing. People share their live experience. They share their content that they have created within the confines of that live experience with their audience. Now, their audience might just be their friends on Facebook, or it might be a dedicated and more professional audience. It doesn't really matter. An audience is an audience, and you're still sharing it for either your professional brand or your personal brand. There's really no distinction between those two things. They're sharing their own content, and that, in effect, changes the way that they are enjoying that event. It also changes the way that the non-attendees at that event enjoy that event as well. So 10 years ago, you would have had very little insight into what happened at the fan experience at Glastonbury, for instance. You'd have had BBC footage, but you'd had very little insight into the fan experience. And now, if you're friends with a handful of lucky people who get to go to Glastonbury, their feed is littered with the Glastonbury experience, and you understand what that is, and the Glastonbury brand grows as a result of that, because they're creating that content. People love to share their own content. Apologies. One thing about Glastonbury, and the sort of interesting tidbits that you can find, yes, you see massive growth. Yes, particular artists drive huge amounts of traffic because people are particularly proud of sharing the fact that they were attending a certain thing. But actually, sometimes you get really odd, anomalous things that happen. Friday of Glastonbury 2016 drove a disproportionately huge spike of data usage. Can anybody guess why Friday of the 2016 Glastonbury Friday morning in particular, drove a particularly huge spike of data usage? It rained? It may have done. That wasn't the reason. Very good. Brexit result. Traffic was absolutely through the roof because people were consuming that enormous seismic result. They didn't want to miss out. Bear in mind the nature of an event changes all the time. It's not just England in a World Cup semi-final. It could be anything. That referendum result, that was an event. People didn't want to miss out. So even though they were in a field in Somerset, they didn't miss out. They consumed that and they shared their view of that. Now, it doesn't take a genius to work out that the demographic of Glastonbury attendees and people who would be suitably outraged by the result of the Brexit vote is a pretty solid Venn diagram of overlap. And people share a lot more when they're outraged than when they're very happy about things, such as life, as we know from having 30 million customers. Not that many of them say how happy they are with us, but they're not so shy coming forward about when we don't do such a good job. Thanks, by the way, to Paul for booking a venue that's a solid concrete box. If anyone wants to talk about the physics of spectral efficiency and attenuation, we can do that, and can chat that through with you all. Did put a lot of pressure on the Wi-Fi, though, didn't it? So in general, people share, people don't miss out, and the key thing that they're sharing their own content. Yeah, the Brexit stuff is anomalous in the sense of it was weird at the time, and it was something that we didn't expect. It drove a bigger spike than we expected, and it doesn't quite fit the bill of sharing your own content. But what we see from live events is sharing your own content. But what the Brexit thing does tell us is that people share at very, very specific times. So let me be very specific about something. This, as the title says, is the social media profile of a football match. This is ITV and Sky, what viewing looks like on mobile. So what's that dip in the middle? Half-time. So what does that tell you that people do at half-time when they're watching football on mobile? Where do they go? Look at those beautiful spikes right in the middle. Facebook, Snapchat, YouTube, a perfectly correlated spike right in the middle. So if you're a marketeer looking at mobile as a platform, looking at an audience that's engaged in football, bearing in mind the size of that audience and bearing in mind, to Emma's point about the passion that comes with being part of that cohort, because you are watching your team playing football, and you want to reach that audience, where would you spend your money in the time period of half-time? Would you put it on ITV Hub? Interesting, by the way, that people watch ITV Hub through Sky. That bottom one is Sky. People watch ITV Hub through Sky, isn't that weird? Anyway, where would you put your money? You'd put your money in social channels that's in related content. They go on those social channels to share their view of what they have just seen and to consume others' views of what they have just seen. So if you want to reach that customer at half time, the moment they're not glued to that screen, that's where you go. So how much does that change what traditional media buying would mean? How much does it give you an opportunity to be hugely targeted in the way that you do things? How much has the technology changed how you market? I think the answer is enormously, because that's exactly what technology does. It changes how we market. And coming back to that piece about the future, what Chris was saying about the future's happening, and then all of a sudden it's there, I think people very much feel, they don't know how to latch onto the technology that is available to us, but by the same token, they're doing it. And they're doing it because actually they're consuming it. They're consuming it themselves. And so really it's quite organic to turn what you do as a consumer into your marketing activities. You shouldn't think of those two things as separate. You should absolutely recognize that your consumption habits are your consumers, your customers or potential customers' consumption habits as well. Specifically onto technology. Who was in marketing before the arrival of 3G as a technology? So 2003 and before. Not many of you. Some of you must have started very young or have a very good skincare regime. It's impressive. What did you do with mobile pre-3G in terms of marketing? Anything? Text campaigns. So static words on a page. Text campaigns. Not even web links. Did you link out of those? No. And you called them. Amazing. That's actually what mobile phones were originally for, calling people. Something we barely do anymore. Voice traffic declines on a month-by-month basis because we just don't call people anymore. 3G marketing, what did we do with that? If 2G was plain text, 3G was what? Pictures. 3G was images. Did anybody try to do video campaigns in a 3G environment? No. A few people tried early on because the networks told them it was going to work, and it didn't. So they stopped trying, and we went with pictures. And once mobile adoption was firmly in place, 2011, let's say, end of the 3G network, but mobile penetration was really high, would you have ever conducted a mobile-based marketing campaign without a picture? It would be a miss, wouldn't it? It would be a slip on your part. 4G adoption is now pretty much complete in terms of the demographics that are spending the most money. What's the 4G video marketing? Sorry, what's the 4G marketing experience? Video. And now, increasingly, in the last 12 months, 360 video. So that's about device capability, it's about app capability, but fundamentally as well, it's about network capability, because it's about throughput. 360 video just takes up more bandwidth, therefore you need a network that can carry more content. So that's the evolution path so far. We've gone from plain text to static images to video to 360 video. And it is now the done thing to have at least video in your marketing on social and in any other channel, and increasingly to have 360 video. What's next? What's this? Anyone recognize this? Pokemon Go. Niantic's amazing game, Pokemon Go. It's not for me, I'll be honest. Who still plays Pokemon Go? Anybody? Good, great. Oh, no, we've got the same guy who plays Dreamcast. Clear correlation. Or causation, take your pick. This is Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go is a very clever AR experience. It's immersive. It does something. By the way, Pokemon Go, we had 300,000 people using Pokemon Go the day before it was launched in the UK because they were so excited about it, they were VPNing into a US version. So it's got a dedicated core of fans. There was about 2 million people using it by the end of day one. Needless to say, that slipped off quite a bit. But it grabbed people's attention. What it does is use the high throughput capability of a mobile network and fundamentally the mobility aspect of a mobile network, because the key thing about mobile is it's not portable nor fixed. It goes with you all the time and it captures your environment. They used AR to put their content into your world. And I know that's exceptionally obvious when you explain it in that way, but that's also incredibly important, because what's more personal than your environment? What's more personal than your world that you're in right now? But in your world right now, which brands are there in front of you? Which brands have managed to enter into your world? Apple, Samsung. Any others? Any other brands that live in your world? Your smartwatch, maybe? Any others that people feel are there in their, you know, when they're absorbing content? Sorry? Fitbit. Apologies. Fitbit. Yeah, Fitbit. That's a great example. That's very much around you. So what Pokemon did, what Pokemon Go did, what Niantic did, the games developer, was they built a game that put the game into your world, and your world was anywhere that you went. Extrapolate that thinking through to a brand opportunity enabled by 5G. So if 2G was plain text and 3G was images and 4G was video and 360 video, 5G is all about immersive video experiences. It's all about AR. And that's because there are two fundamental characteristics of 5G networks. This is not going to be very technical, it'll be very quick. One is massive throughput, so the amount of bandwidth that you have, the amount of data coming through to your phone at any given time massively increases. And the second thing that increases or decreases rather, is latency. That's the time it takes for the signal to get to and from the internet. And that means that the AR experience is smoother. So if you have a really bad VR experience, it makes you throw up because there's a disjoint between your world and the world that you're watching. And it creates jitter and lag, and it's quite uncomfortable. So a good AR and VR experience has very low latency. So what 5G will create, and what I would say in 5 years' time, will be the absolute norm for content creation and marketing approaches, in the same way that putting video together is the absolute norm now. When did I mean, for Emma, for instance, as the one person I know in the room who is pretty dedicated to PR, when was the last time anybody did a PR campaign that didn't have video in the last 2 years? It doesn't happen. You do video now as a matter of course, because that's absolutely, you know, the content that people want, and bear in mind they're consuming it all on mobile. So your marketing habits and behaviors are dictated entirely by the technology that people are using and have in their hands. In 5 years' time, it will be the norm to build immersive video experiences for your customers. And what does that do? That's going to put your brand into their environment. And that's going to do two things. It's going to create a world that it's going to be inherently personal, because it's their world. And when they share it, and we know that people share their own content, and if you take Emma's amazing golden ticket example, which I think is wonderful, because it was so simple, it put something physical in their hands that they wanted to have a picture of, that they wanted to share. If you give something to somebody, this is the digital version of that. If you put that in their world, it's your brand, it's in their world, it's personal to them, they're sharing it, that couldn't be more authentic. You know it's personal to them. And so do their followers. And maybe that is one of the ways in which we'll use technology to get to a point where you can scale the notion of personal and authentic. I'd really like to do, we haven't had a lot of Q&A, but I'd like to do Q&A if that's okay with Paul. If people have questions, I hope you do, because it's a sign of a good presentation. And if you don't, it'll be we'll be back on schedule. A little summary of what I've tried to say that's behind us. More time on mobile, more sharing, but it's sharing of their content. People aren't madly keen on sharing a brand's content, apart from with a few notable exceptions where they're hugely bought in, and that's extremely rare, but they do share their own content. So what can you do to put your brand into their content? Can you achieve that? You can achieve that in the coming years with technology, because 5G networks are going to enable an AR-type experience where your brand will be in their world. And hopefully that will enable personal brand engagement. And hopefully people do have some questions. Come on, help me out. Yep, got a couple at the back. That's very kind. What's next for mobile? More of the same. More of the same next for mobile, in terms of more people will adopt more capable smartphones There'll be no revolution in terms of behaviour. I don't think anybody is suggesting at any point that we're going to radically change anything in the way that we do things. But there's perhaps one thing that has reared its head once in the last few years, and it then died quite quickly, and it will come back. Smartwatches are interesting because they demonstrate something. They demonstrate the miniaturization of technology. And that's really important. Because that miniaturization of technology means you could start to put that same technology into these. Google Glass did it, but Google Glass forgot one thing, that people give a shit about how they look. I quite like my glasses. They suit me, I think. Google Glass made me look like an idiot, so I didn't wear them, even if it had a fundamentally amazing capability. Look what's happened to the smartwatch. It was pretty ugly, but a watch is a slightly more functional item, so that was sort of okay. Now they're inherently very stylish, and in fact, people are focusing more on style innovation and aesthetic in the watch than on technology innovation. If you take the miniaturization of technology demonstrated by the watch, put it into the glasses, add in a recognition of style and aesthetic, and then start to think about that AR environment, and then start to think about something called the Internet of Things, where you start to say that everything in the world is connected. Static objects that previously you'd just considered to be dormant, actually they have some sort of digital connection. And then you start to think about having a digital overlay to your world that's permanent. Like the Terminator, but without the death and destruction and Armageddon. He sees things and understands exactly what they are because of a digital overlay. That is absolutely going to happen in mobile. Mobile will move away from the smartphone and into disparate devices that you wear around your body. I don't think the black slate will go away, but I think you will move to disparate devices with different functionality. And if AR can only be achieved by me pointing my phone at something and looking through the phone, then that is an inherent limitation. But what if it's immersive because actually it's all around me, because the filter is half an inch from my eye? That then changes the prevalence of that capability. So augmented reality, literally the augmentation of my environment through a digital interface, a digital overlay, that's the next big thing for mobile.
Where can you see kind of voice first and things like Siri and stuff like that on the mobile phone going, and in terms of getting that personal message and being able to get that interaction where you use your voice to voice rather than voice to text or anything else?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we see voice as being massively important to the future, but we see it as not necessarily being a connectivity thing. So voice calling will come down, but voice instruction will go up. And that is because of the proliferation of devices, and you do not want to have a physical touch with each of those devices. And if you're building those devices as a manufacturer, you don't want to put in controls and keyboards into them. If my glasses are connected, where do I touch them to do something? If the earpiece I'm wearing is connected, where do I touch it to do something? You would immediately lose the opportunity to be small. Even Amazon, even the Echo and whatever, they don't want to build in control functionality into those. They want to be able to rely on voice. Clever thing about voice is it paired with machine learning. I'm not sure I want to call it AI yet. AI and machine learning. AI is still, with very few notable exceptions, bullshit. Most of it's just machine learning and isn't nearly as clever as you think it is. But actually, if you pair voice with a fairly powerful machine learning algorithm, then actually you can create something that certainly feels personal. It has the illusion of personal. You become quite chatty with your friend who tell you ask questions and they give you answers. That's a clever way of scaling personal again. Yeah, the front. Yeah. Oh, absolutely, yeah, yeah. Okay, that's a really good point. So it is technology focused in the sense that mobile has a very clear roadmap, and you build that technology out into the future, and you know exactly what you're going to build. Where you build it is part of experience. So to labour the point, this room is a concrete box, and O2, I think, have a little bit of signal in here, somebody said earlier, so that's good. Their site is obviously closer to this building than ours, and uses a lower frequency spectrum, which therefore makes it wave better through the walls, and therefore gets to us a little bit stronger than ours. So good on them. I'm fucked off about this, by the way. Am I hiding that? I feel like I've been set up. I've known Paul for 15 years. Bastard. Where was I? Right, yes, experience. You are right in the sense that you have to think about the customer's experience of your product. Can you personalize it to them? To some extent, the notion of the network and the notion of personal are really quite distinct. You put it to connect as many people as you possibly can. One thing from a technology perspective you try to do is you try to make the bearer, the customer, not care about the bearer that they're connected to. So if you are on 4G, 5G or Wi-Fi, you should have a good experience that reflects everything that you can do with your mobile device and consume every bit of content that's out there. The ambition for the mobile industry at large is an experience one, not a technology one. It's the perception of infinite capacity. It's that I can always do whatever I want to do, and I never have to think about whether or not I have the capability to do it. So whether that's just going on Facebook and it's like 2 megabits per second requirement and no real latency, or whether that's uploading some huge file or living in a virtual holographic world, I can always do it because I always have that capability. So that's very much experience-based, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that that's personal. One final question? Yeah, guy in the blue jacket, sorry. That's a great question. It is all about creativity. Bear in mind you are building an overlay to the customer's own world, their own environment. You have to do something, build something that they would look at and say, yeah, wow, that's great content, screenshot that, share that, video shot that, share that. I don't know the creative solution, but bear in mind the capability, which is the device's capability to present, to have huge bandwidth capabilities, camera capabilities, the network capability to be able to put almost anything in front of that customer when they look through their device or they look through their glasses, whatever that filter is. What would you put there? I have one final thing from a technology perspective, which I think maybe gets towards the vision of this. Does anyone know what the Turing test is? So the Turing test was created by Alan Turing, and it is a very simple way of, he said, what I want to get to and what I envisage as the future is that interaction between a person, you will not be able to tell in a blind test whether you are talking to a person or a computer. That was from the 1940s, and it was a very early view of artificial intelligence, that the computer, through a series of blind responses, could make you think it was human. I think we will get, in the next 5 years, to a new Turing test, which is, I don't know which ones of you in the room are really here, and which ones of you in the room are somewhere else, but you're enjoying this content on an augmented reality basis. That's the new Turing test. Which one of you is effectively a hologram? Which one of you is effectively just a digital overlay into my real world? Would that change the way that I interact with you? Would I be able to tell? That, I think, is the vision of the future in terms of the way in which we will interact and the way in which mobile will play a role for us. I think I'm done.
Thank you, Howard.